I lived a life many people could only dream about. I was born into huge wealth as the daughter of a powerful rich man, and I was surrounded by everything money could buy. Fancy cars, private jets, expensive clothes, and special parties were all part of my world. But very few people knew who my father was, for reasons of safety, privacy, and because I wanted to be seen as my own person. I always kept my father's name a secret. To everyone else, I was just a mysterious young woman living a rich life, and that was how I liked it. My days started late, usually around noon, because my nights were always filled with fun and excitement. I would wake up in my king-sized bed, covered in silk sheets, look out at the city from my penthouse window, and decide which of my cars I wanted to drive that day. Some days it was my smooth Rolls-Royce, other days my bright red sports car, and sometimes I would take my white Mercedes just because it matched my mood. People would stop and stare wherever I went, and I loved the attention. Shopping was my favorite thing to do. I would spend hours in the most expensive stores, buying whatever caught my eye. Designer clothes from famous brands filled my huge closets. I had rooms just for shoes, rooms just for handbags, and rooms just for jewelry. My friends would joke that I could open my own store with all the things I owned. Every week, I would fly to different cities just to eat at the best restaurants. Paris for French food, Tokyo for sushi, New York for steaks. I attended fashion shows where models walked down runways wearing clothes that cost more than most people's cars. I traveled to beautiful islands where I would stay in private resorts, swim in crystal clear water, and sunbathe on beaches that were closed to regular people. Money was never a problem. I never had to check prices or worry about spending too much. If I wanted something, I bought it. If I wanted to go somewhere, I went. My credit cards had no limits, and my bank account seemed to never get empty. My social life was all about big parties hosted by famous people and important folks. I knew celebrities, business owners, politicians, and people who were famous just for being rich. We would meet at fancy clubs, private mansions, and exclusive events that regular people could never attend. The parties were always amazing, with the best food, the most expensive drinks, and entertainment that money could buy. Among all these parties, one of the most special and mysterious parties was hosted by a man known simply as NDE. Nobody knew his real name or where he came from, but everyone wanted to be invited to his parties. NDE's parties were legendary, filled with important guests, bright flashing lights, loud music, endless drinks, and activities that pushed the limits of what was proper. At NDE's parties, anything went. People would drink until they couldn't, stand, dance until dawn, and do things they would never do in their normal lives. The music was so loud you could feel it in your chest. The lights flashed in colors that made everything look like a dream. Beautiful people walked around barely dressed, and in private rooms, people did things that would shock most people. I loved these parties. They made me feel alive and free. I could forget about everything and just enjoy myself. I would dance with strangers, drink expensive wine, and feel like I was living life to the fullest. These parties made my regular rich life seem boring. Even with all this fun, I had moments when I thought about God. I was raised with some knowledge about faith, so I sometimes went to church services. My mother had taught me to pray when I was little, and I still remembered some Bible verses from Sunday school. But for me, church was more like a habit than something I really cared about. When I did go to church, which was maybe once or twice a month, I would sit in the back row, wearing my designer clothes and expensive jewelry. I would listen to the pastor talk about sin, forgiveness, and living a holy life, but his words seemed to bounce off me like water off a duck. I would think about my plans for the weekend, the party I was going to attend, or the new car I wanted to buy. I believed in God, but I never took his ways seriously. I thought God was okay with my lifestyle as long as I was a good person and didn't hurt anyone. I gave money to charity sometimes, and I was nice to people, so I figured that was enough. Life was too fun and exciting, and I didn't want anything to slow me down or make me feel guilty about enjoying myself. Then came April 14th, a night that would change everything. That evening, I got a special invitation to one of Didi's most secret parties, held at the Glass Tower. This was a tall, shiny building in the heart of the city that Didi often used for his private gatherings. The invitation came on expensive paper with gold writing that simply said, "Tonight, Glass Tower, come alone." I was excited because these secret parties were even more exclusive than his regular ones. I spent hours getting ready, choosing a black dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary, diamond earrings that sparkled like stars, and shoes that were so expensive they came with their own security guard when I bought them. I looked perfect, like I always did. When I arrived at the Glass Tower, the party was already in full swing. The building was packed with important people, celebrities, models, and business leaders. Some faces I recognized from magazines and TV shows. Others were mysterious like Didi himself. The music was louder than usual, the lights were more hypnotic, and the atmosphere felt more intense than any party I had been to before. People were drinking champagne that cost thousands of dollars per bottle. There were rooms where people were smoking things that weren't cigarettes. In other rooms, people were dancing in ways that would make most people blush. Some guests were barely dressed, others were completely naked in certain areas of the building. It was like all the rules of normal society had been thrown out the window. I moved from room to room, dancing, drinking, and talking with people. Everyone seemed to be having the time of their lives. The energy was electric, and I felt like I was floating on air. This was what I lived for, these moments of pure excitement and freedom. But something was different that night. About 2 hours into the party, I started feeling uncomfortable. It began as a small, strange feeling in my stomach, like something was wrong, but I couldn't figure out what. Then a small headache started forming behind my eyes. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was from the loud music, the wine, or maybe not getting enough sleep the night before. I had been to so many parties recently that I barely slept anymore. I kept dancing, laughing, and talking with people, but the discomfort slowly grew throughout the night. The headache got a little worse, and the strange feeling in my stomach became stronger. It was like my body was trying to tell me something, but I didn't want to listen. I was having too much fun to let a little discomfort ruin my night. I drank more wine, thinking it would help me relax, but it only made the weird feeling stronger. By the time I decided to leave the party, it was almost 4 a.m. The headache had become much stronger, and I felt dizzy and nauseous. I called my driver and told him to take me home as quickly as possible. During the drive, the pain in my head got worse and worse. It felt like someone was hitting my skull with a hammer. When I finally got home, I could barely walk. My huge mansion, which usually felt like a palace, now felt like a prison. I stumbled to my bedroom and collapsed on my bed. The headache was so bad that I couldn't think straight. It started as a dull pain, but quickly became sharp and pounding, like my brain was trying to explode out of my head. I was scared because I had never felt anything like this before. I had always been healthy, always been strong. I called for medical help and my private medical team rushed to my house. These were the best doctors money could buy, people who took care of only the richest families in the city. But by the time they arrived, something terrible was happening to me. The pain was so intense that I couldn't speak or move. I could hear people talking around me, but their voices sounded far away. I felt like I was sinking into a deep, dark ocean. My parents, who had been called right away, were by my side. I could hear my mother crying and my father shouting orders at the doctors. Panic filled the room as they watched the medical team work on me. The doctors were running tests, giving me medicine through needles and trying everything they could think of, but nothing seemed to help. My breathing slowed down and my heartbeat got weaker and weaker. I could feel my body shutting down, but I couldn't do anything to stop it. Then, without warning, something strange began to happen. I felt like my soul was being pulled away from my body. It was the most unusual feeling I had ever experienced. I felt myself leaving my body slowly, like being gently lifted upward by invisible hands. The noise of the room, my mother's crying, my father's shouting, the doctors talking, all began to fade away as a strange calm took over me. I looked down and saw my body lying on the bed, surrounded by doctors and machines. My parents were holding my hands and crying. It was like watching a movie of my own life, but I wasn't in my body anymore. I was floating above it, watching everything happen. I live. The next thing I knew, I was standing in front of a familiar place, the glass tower where I had just been at the party. But this time, everything felt very different. The air was heavy and thick, like trying to breathe through a wet blanket. The atmosphere was darker than before, and an eerie silence surrounded the tall building. Even though it was the same building, it felt completely different, like it was in another world. I felt compelled by some invisible force to enter. Inside, it was like another NDE party was happening, but it wasn't quite the same. People were drinking, dancing, and doing all kinds of wild activities. Loud music played. Models walked around in revealing outfits, and drugs were being passed around freely. Private rooms were filled with unspeakable acts, people tangled up in physical desires, pushing all boundaries of what was decent. This was the secret world of NDE, a world I had been part of but never fully understood. As I watched, something strange happened. The scene began to change, as if a covering was being lifted from my eyes. Suddenly I was seeing everything from a spiritual point of view. In this new sight, the lights that once looked beautiful now appeared as flickering evil fires. The music carried chants instead of melodies. Shadow-like figures, not fully human, walked among the crowd, whispering into people's ears, guiding their every move. The drinks glowed with a dark mist, as though mixed with spiritual poison. The people were no longer themselves, but seemed like puppets controlled by invisible strings. Atward, the center of it all, stood NDE himself, but he was different now. His face, once charming, now showed a sinister grin. Around him were strange symbols drawn on the ground, mysterious signs I could not fully understand. I watched in horror as NDE performed a ritual, chanting words in an ancient language. A black smoke rose and formed a ring around the guests, binding them together in an invisible chain. I realized that everyone who entered these parties unknowingly came under NDE's spiritual control. The ritual enslaved them, making them desire whatever NDE desired, making them lose control of their own will. The spell made them addicted to pleasure, slaves to lust, and admirers of wrong things. I was trembling as I wandered deeper into the building. I noticed a heavy, locked door that seemed to call my attention. Strangely, the door opened for me as I approached. Inside the room, what I saw froze me in place. A group of naked men were inside, doing unnatural sexual acts with each other, acts that went against nature and human decency. Their faces showed no shame or awareness that I was there. It was as if they were trapped in a trance, fully consumed by the strange powers controlling them. I turned to leave, but just as I reached the door, NDE appeared again. This time, he slowly removed his clothing, showing markings all over his body, mysterious tattoos glowing with a dim light. But before anything else could happen, the scene shifted again. I now saw the wider effect of NDE's influence. Many of the people who went to his parties would leave with changed desires. Men who once loved women started wanting other men. Women started chasing after women. Relationships became twisted, A natural love was replaced by unnatural cravings. It was as if Didi's gatherings were creating waves of confusion and moral decay that spread like a disease into the world. At that moment, a powerful voice broke. Through the darkness. "Clarissa," the voice said, "this is the true face of Didi and his work. The world sees only glamour, but I show you the spirit behind it. I've allowed you to see these things so you may become my voice, so you may warn others, reveal this darkness, and call them to turn away from sin. Many are enslaved and do not know it. Speak out. Pray for Didi, for even now his soul is bound in chains." The voice was filled with authority and compassion, and I wept as I listened. Suddenly, I heard my name being called again, but this time from a different place. Faint voices echoed, "Clarissa, Clarissa." The dark scene began to fade like mist disappearing under the sun. Slowly, the colors of life returned. The spiritual realm vanished, and I found myself opening my eyes back in my room, surrounded by doctors, nurses, and my crying parents. I had returned, but I was no longer the same. The luxury life that once blinded me now felt empty. I knew I had seen a glimpse of what few people ever see, a secret realm hidden beneath the glamorous world I once embraced. From that day forward, I carried a new mission, a calling to expose the unseen chains, to warn others, and to pray for the lost, including Didi himself. My encounter was no accident. It was grace.